Forget everything you think you know about monsters. Because the real ones didn't hide under beds. They walked among us. Spoke like us. Loved, married, and worked, just like us. But when the night came, they cooked. They carved. They ate. This isn't a tale of tribes in distant jungles. This is history, Europe, America, Australia. Names forgotten in textbooks, but not in the soil. Over 10 stories, we'll journey from blood-stained castles to war-torn kitchens, from religious rituals to modern apartments where the screams were never heard. Some killed out of desperation. Others called it art. One even asked to be eaten. These aren't horror stories. They're court records. They're photographs. They're confessions written in blood. You've heard of vampires and werewolves, but you've never heard of these. Here are 10 real cannibals in history you were never told about. They called him Sonnie Beam, but history remembers his full name, Alexander Sonnie Beam, the man who supposedly led the most horrific cannibal clan to ever stain Scotland's shores. In the early 1500s, Alexander Sonnie Beam and his wife Agnes Douglas fled society and disappeared into a sea cave along the remote coast of Ayrshire. There, hidden by tides and fog, they birthed a new kind of family, one born not of morality or religion, but of bloodlust and primal law. Over the next 25 years, it's said they raised nearly 50 children and grandchildren, all through incest. Together, this inbred tribe of cannibals ambushed travelers, butchered their victims, and dragged the remains back to their cave to roast over stolen fires. Bones piled high. Flesh was salted, organs hung from hooks. As locals began to whisper about disappearances, they invented legends, highway robbers, sea beasts, vengeful spirits. But no one guessed the truth, that a human predator had founded a nation within the rocks. According to later reports, the family killed and ate over 1,000 people before a single survivor escaped an ambush and alerted the King of Scotland. The king personally led a hunting party to the Bean family cave. What they found inside made seasoned soldiers weep, limbs scattered like firewood, pickled jars of body parts, and children gnawing bones like toys. Alexander Sonnie Bean and Agnes Douglas were captured along with their offspring and taken to Edinburgh, where they were executed without trial. Some say they were dismembered alive. Others believe the story was exaggerated royal propaganda. But even if the numbers were inflated, the horror still stands, a hidden society of flesh, a bloodline raised on murder, and a legend so deeply carved into Scottish folklore that locals still avoid certain cliffs, even now. Whether Sonnie Bean was real or myth, one truth remains, something once lived in that cave, and it fed on us. His neighbors thought he was boring. His students thought he was strange. The Soviet state thought he was invisible. But between 1978 and 1990, Andrei Chikatilo slaughtered at least 52 people, mostly women and children, and in many cases, he ate parts of their bodies. Born in Ukraine under Stalin's reign, Chikatilo grew up starving. He watched his neighbors eat grass, bark, and, allegedly, each other. That hunger never left him. It twisted into something darker. Something predatory. By the time he became a schoolteacher, Chikatilo had learned to blend in, soft voice, dull gaze, unremarkable clothes. But inside, he was unraveling. His crime started with stabbing, escalated to sexual mutilation, and eventually became ritualistic dismemberment. He bit off nipples, chewed on genitals, gutted his victims with such frenzy that investigators believed wild animals had done it. The Soviet authorities were so unwilling to admit a serial killer could exist under socialism, they arrested over 100 innocent men before facing the truth. Chikatilo carried a briefcase filled with knives, ropes, and lubricant. He lured victims from train stations, forests, even schools. He confessed calmly, stating he gained pleasure and power from tearing bodies open and tasting their flesh. When finally caught in 1990, Chikatilo said the meat of his victims gave him relief from impulses he couldn't control. In court, he was calm. Cold. He blamed everything, society, trauma, impotence. But he never denied the blood on his hands, or in his teeth. His final words before execution in 1994. "Don't blow my brains out." They did anyway. in a soundproof chamber. The Soviet Union had finally admitted its monster existed, but only after he had fed for over a decade. Andrei Chikatilo wasn't just a cannibal. He was a product of a system that refused to see evil until it began to rot from within. If hell had a mailman, his name was Albert Fish. By the 1930s, he had already been a painter, a husband, and a father of 6, but behind his gray mustache and church manners hid something far more horrifying. Albert Fish was not only a serial killer, he was a cannibal who took pleasure in torturing and eating children. What makes him truly terrifying isn't just what he did, it's what he wrote. In 1934, a mother received a letter. It was handwritten, polite, and calmly detailed how her 10-year-old daughter, Grace Budd, was murdered, roasted in an oven, and eaten, piece by piece. The letter was signed by Fish himself. Born in 1870, Albert Fish claimed to have murdered at least 100 children. He believed God had commanded him to torture the innocent. He inserted needles into his own groin. He whipped himself with belts made of nail-studded leather. He confessed to drinking blood, frying body parts in lard, and cooking stew from buttocks and ears. Police called him the Gray Man, the Moon Maniac, and the Brooklyn Vampire. But to his victims' families, he was simply the devil wearing a coat. When arrested, he calmly confessed everything. He described human meat as sweet and tender like veal. During trial, he recited Bible verses and smiled. He claimed insanity, but the jury still found him sane enough to die. In 1936, Albert Fish was executed in the electric chair, an ending so strange that his body reportedly short-circuited the machine due to the dozens of needles still lodged in his pelvis. Albert Fish remains one of the most disturbing figures in American crime, not just because he killed and ate, but because he enjoyed describing it, inch by inch, in his own handwriting. Evil, in his case, was literate. She was a former model. Tall, elegant, with striking Egyptian features. In the early 1990s, Omaima Nelson lived in sunny California and blended right in. No one would have guessed she was about to become one of the most shocking cannibals in American history. On Thanksgiving weekend in 1991, Omaima killed her husband. Then she chopped him into pieces. Not out of panic. Not even out of rage. But with eerie precision and, if prosecutors are to be believed, pleasure. Omaima had only been married to William Nelson for 3 weeks when she snapped. She tied him to a chair, beat him with an iron, stabbed him with scissors, and eventually dismembered his entire body. When police arrived at her apartment, they found a fried human hand in the kitchen, ribs in the oven, and foil-wrapped organs in the freezer. Omaima claimed she had been abused. She claimed self-defense. But when investigators found parts of William's pelvis boiling in seasoned broth, they began to suspect this wasn't just survival. This was transformation, fury turned into ritual. In court, a psychiatrist testified that Omaima believed killing and eating her husband would give her strength, that she was channeling an ancient Egyptian goddess who devoured men who mistreated women. Her defense called her psychotic. The jury called her guilty. She was sentenced to 27 years to life. To this day, she has never fully denied cooking parts of William's body. And while she may not fit the image of a savage monster, Omaima Nelson proved that cannibalism can wear perfume, smile sweetly, and serve vengeance one rib at a time. He didn't kill out of anger. He didn't eat out of desperation. Armin Meiwes simply had a fantasy, and someone agreed to fulfill it. In 2001, inside a quiet German village, Armin posted on a cannibalism forum looking for a willing victim. His ad was shockingly polite, looking for a well-built man, 18 to 30, to be slaughtered and consumed. To his surprise, someone responded. His name was Bernd Brandis, a successful engineer. They met in Meiwes' home, drank wine, watched Star Trek, and calmly discussed how Bernd wanted to die. What followed was one of the most surreal acts in criminal history. Meiwes cut off Bernd's penis, cooked it, and they tried to eat it together. Hours later, he stabbed Bernd to death, carved him like an animal, and filmed the entire process. For the next 10 months, Armin stored the flesh in his freezer and continued to eat pieces slowly, serving them with potatoes and wine. When arrested, he was cooperative, even friendly. He insisted it was consensual. that he had fulfilled a shared dream. And in a way, the law wasn't sure what to do. There were no charges for cannibalism in Germany. His first conviction was for manslaughter. Only after public outcry was he retried and sentenced to life for murder. To this day, Armin Meiwes says he regrets nothing, except that there are many others like him out there, and most won't ask permission first. He remains in prison, calm, articulate, and forever known as the Rodenburg cannibal, the man who invited his meal to dinner. He wanted to absorb her beauty. That's what he said. Not love her, not possess her, consume her. In 1981, Issei Sagawa was a Japanese student studying literature in Paris. Soft-spoken, short, and brilliant, he seemed harmless. But behind his thick glasses lived an obsession that had festered for years. One night, he invited Renée Hartevelt, a Dutch classmate, to his apartment under the pretense of reading poetry. As she sat with her back turned, he shot her in the neck with a hunting rifle. Then he raped her corpse and began to eat her. He started with her buttocks, then moved to her thighs. He photographed everything. He described the texture. He tried to eat her nipples raw, then cooked them. Issei Sagawa kept parts of her in the fridge and read books beside her half-eaten body for days. Eventually, he placed the remains into 2 suitcases and tried to dump them in a nearby lake, but was caught in the act. The trial never came. French authorities deemed him legally insane and unfit to stand trial. Instead of prison, he was sent to a mental institution, where he lived comfortably, reading, writing, and painting. Then came the twist. The French deported him to Japan, and Japanese authorities couldn't charge him. He was released. A free man. And for the next decades, Issei Sagawa became a minor celebrity. He wrote books, gave interviews, starred in documentaries, even reviewed restaurants. A cannibal turned cultural curiosity. He died in 2022. Never imprisoned. Never punished. Just remembered. And perhaps that's the most chilling part, not that he ate someone, but that the world let him digest her in peace. They set out chasing the American dream, but ended up eating it. In 1846, a group of pioneers known as the Donner Party left Illinois in covered wagons, bound for California. They were families, farmers, hopeful settlers chasing gold and freedom. But they made one mistake. They trusted a shortcut. A man named Lansford Hastings had published a new route through the Sierra Nevada mountains, claiming it would save weeks. It didn't. It trapped them in snow. 30 feet deep. No way forward. No way back. For months, they waited. Then they starved. They boiled hides for broth. They chewed on leather belts. They ate their dogs. And then, when the weakest began to die, they did the unthinkable. They cooked the bodies. They passed thigh bones around like bread. They fed children with the flesh of their uncles. Some refused, clinging to hope. Others chose life, no matter the cost. When rescuers finally arrived in the spring of 1847, they found sunken eyes, bones scattered, and stories that still send chills through the American imagination. Of the 87 who began the journey, nearly half died. The rest lived, but were never the same. The Donner Party became a national legend. A cautionary tale. But behind the myth are real people, men and women who looked at the bodies of their friends and made the most ancient, desperate choice. To live, someone must be eaten. And so they did. When police entered the house, they thought they'd walked into a slaughterhouse. Blood on the walls. Flesh on the floor. And a pot still simmering on the stove. Inside was a human head, boiled and seasoned. The woman responsible, Katherine Knight. A former slaughterhouse worker, mother, and the first woman in Australian history sentenced to life without parole. In 2000, after years of violent relationships and escalating rage, she murdered her partner, John Price, in a way that defies comprehension. She stabbed him 37 times as he slept. Then she skinned his entire body, head to toe, in one continuous piece and hung the skin on a meat hook in the living room. Then she decapitated him. She cooked his head in a pot with vegetables. She prepared 2 place settings at the table, each with a name card for his children. She meant to serve them their father. But before they arrived, she passed out. Police found her unconscious, blood everywhere, and John's body skinned and headless. When questioned, she claimed to remember nothing. But her diary told another story, full of hatred, jealousy, and a desire to destroy the man who left her. Unlike other cannibals in history, Katherine Knight wasn't driven by starvation or delusion. She was driven by fury. And she turned a home into a kitchen of revenge. To this day, she sits behind bars in a maximum security prison. She has never shown remorse. Never explained why. And perhaps she never will. Because some monsters aren't born. They're built, one wound at a time. She believed human sacrifice could protect her children. That's what she told herself. That's how she justified the smell of boiling blood coming from her kitchen. In 1939, in the small Italian town of Correggio, Leonarda Cianciulli, widowed, superstitious, and obsessively devoted to her sons, turned murder into ritual. When her eldest boy was drafted into World War II, she panicked. A fortune teller had once warned her, "All your children will die." So Leonarda made a plan. If the universe demanded blood, she would offer it. Not her sons. Someone else's. Her victims were local women, lonely, vulnerable, and trusting. She promised them jobs, love, and safety. Then, once inside her home, she drugged them, slit their throats, and chopped them into pieces. But she didn't just dispose of the bodies. She rendered the flesh down with caustic soda. Turned the fat into soap. Used the blood in baking. She served cakes to neighbors made from her victims. And bathed with their remains. She said it made her skin soft. When arrested, she smiled and corrected the police on the number of victims. "Free," she said. "And I gave them all happy deaths." Her trial became a national spectacle. A housewife turned ritualist. A killer with measuring cups and incantations. She was declared legally insane but was sent to prison anyway, where she died in 1970. Her cooking pots and tools are still displayed in a crime museum. Because Leonarda Cianciulli didn't just kill, she transformed murder into motherhood, and flesh into soap. She didn't see herself as evil. She saw herself as a mother who cleaned the world, one bar at a time. In 1589, the town of Bedburg, Germany, believed they had caught a werewolf. Not a creature of legend, but a man named Peter Stump. A farmer, a father, and according to the charges, a devil in human skin. His confession was torn from him under torture. He claimed he had made a pact with Satan, who gave him a magical belt that turned him into a wolf. In that form, he murdered and devoured over a dozen people, men, women, and children. He allegedly tore unborn babies from wombs and chewed on their hearts. He was also accused of incest with his daughter and even with a demon in disguise. But was it true? Or was Peter Stump the victim of a witch hunt fueled by mass hysteria, religious terror, and political scapegoating? Historians debate. What's not debated is what happened to him. He was executed in the most brutal way imaginable. Strapped to a wagon wheel, his flesh was ripped with red-hot pincers. His arms and legs were broken. His head was cut off. His body was burned. His daughter and mistress were executed beside him. They called him a werewolf. A cannibal. A monster. But beneath the myth, there is a deeper truth, one about fear, madness, and how far society will go to make sense of evil. Whether Peter Stump truly ate flesh or simply became a vessel for collective horror, his story still echoes across Europe, as the man who may or may not have hunted as a wolf, but most certainly died as a man consumed by legend. They didn't all kill out of hunger. Some killed out of ritual. Some for revenge. And some, just to see what it felt like. These weren't monsters in the woods. They were husbands, wives, neighbors, mothers. They lived in castles, cottages, apartments. They were educated. Loved. Forgotten. And yet, they devoured the people closest to them, sometimes with ceremony, sometimes with wine. The horror isn't just what they did, it's how human they were. Because the line between man and monster is thinner than we think. History doesn't bury these people to protect us. It buries them because they remind us of what we're still capable of. We tell ourselves we're civilized, that we've evolved, that we're better. But every famine, every war, every bloodstained kitchen proves otherwise. Cannibalism is not some ancient taboo, it's a mirror. And if you stare into it long enough, you might see something staring back.